Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today we're taking a look at something pretty spectacular, and honestly, this is a knife. I'll tell you what it is in a second here for those of you who don't know. I guess many of you will now read that and know, but this is a knife that I did not ever anticipate being able to handle. And so I've got to say a huge thank you to a viewer and to a fellow knife enthusiast. If you want to go and follow Daniel at Daniel Brown Hallbrook on Instagram is how you go ahead and do that. And I've got to say that, when he first put this knife, he offered it in trade and I wasn't interested in owning it. And so he said, look, I can still send it for a video. And I was like, please, that would be so awesome. And so he has been kind enough to send this really cool knife for me to check out and make a video for you guys. I'm going to talk about a couple of things in this video. First, I want to talk about a little bit about the original custom that this is based on, which was a highly sought after and really interesting custom knife. Then I want to talk about this knife in particular, and I also want to talk about a hard use knife and the dilemma that this knife and some others really put us in when it comes to using our hard use tools. All right, so first off, this is based on the custom buster done by Snecx Design Lab. And if you follow Snecx on Instagram, one of the things he did there was kind of go through the whole process on Instagram. So you could kind of follow this knife coming together. And he said something interesting there. He designed this to be a tank of a knife, to just be overbuilt and strong and durable. And specifically, he said he wanted to be able to chop like this so that he could chop into coconuts. And, living in Canada, I won't be chopping into any coconuts anytime soon, but I can still appreciate a knife that is able to do it. So I've got to say, from a design standpoint, I like hard use knives. I like heavy duty knives. And that means this is kind of right in my wheelhouse. Now, this is, of course, not the custom. The customs were very hard to get a hold of and extremely expensive. I believe there were only 18 made. So think about that, 18 made. And I could be off on that by one, like it could have been 19. I can't remember if like the 18th or the 19th, but I know at the end there was one kind of auctioned off. So I could be, maybe it was 19, but anyway, very few of them available out there, very expensive. And even if you had all the money in the world, there's only 18. So the chances of, one of the people who owns them being ready to sell right when you want to buy is not super high. So really difficult to get a hold of. However, this is not the custom. This is a collaboration with Jake Hoback. So this is what would you say, a semi-production or mid-tech version built through Jake Hoback's manufacturing setup where, they make the Quayback and the MK Ultra, and they have a couple of other models. So this is sort of a collaboration between Jake Hoback and Snecx Design Lab. And it really is kind of a match made in heaven on that front, because the Quayback is a big, heavy duty, hard use type of knife. And so it made a lot of sense, I think, to have them do the manufacturing side of this particular build, just because, that's right, as I say, just like it's right in my wheelhouse, well, it's right in Jake's wheelhouse to do a heavy duty, overbuilt, hard use type of knife, because that's what he's used to building. Okay, so that kind of gives you a bit of background. Now let me add one more point here, and that is this is not going to be like my typical review. I have not carried and used this as much as I normally would in preparation for a tabletop review. I just haven't, because I know how expensive these are and how hard they are to get. So if somehow I completely destroyed this knife, I don't know how I would do that, but if the worst thing happened, I couldn't just go and buy another one. They're sold out, and who knows how long it's going to take before there are any more available. So these are not, even in the mid-tech version or whatever, high-end production version, whatever you want to call it, these are still not widely available, and they're certainly not cheap. Okay, so that gives you a bit of background on where this knife came from. Now, I do want to make this point, and I'll kind of deal with it as we work our way through the knife, but there are some significant differences between this and the custom, and that's a little disappointing. There are some things that make the custom buster very compelling, and some of those things are missing on this knife. So, I don't know whether that's by design, if part of the allure and the exclusivity of owning that custom was that you get some of those features that aren't going to be available anywhere else, or whether it was just straight up a matter of production, retooling and designing the CAD files and getting everything ready to produce the features that the custom had. Maybe that was just too involved. I don't know. All right. If Jake Hoback, if you're watching this, or if Snecx is watching this, go ahead and comment down below and maybe let us in on what was the motivation behind dropping some of the features that we would see on a full custom. All right. Now, let's get into the actual knife itself. First of all, pointing out that this is a huge knife, okay? And that's, I like big knives, but this is very big. I'll throw in a Recon 1 really quickly here for a second, just to let you see, this is quite a bit bigger. Maybe not quite a bit bigger, but it's bigger than a Recon 1. I can't even get them both in frame. There you go. Well, now move this one back a little bit. There we go. Okay, so you can see this is bigger than a Recon 1. It's not bigger than a 4MAX. Okay, I do have a 4MAX over here, and we'll probably bring this guy in again, but that should give you an idea of what you're dealing with in terms of size. 4 inches on the blade, 9.5 inches overall, 5 3/8 on the handle, and this guy weighs in at over 6 ounces. Now, that's not a huge deal. 6 ounces. I have carried this a little bit, and it's not totally impossible to carry. It's not uncomfortable, but it is definitely on the heavier side of the equation, and so that may put some of you off right away. But if you're into bigger knives, and if you're into customs and mid-techs, they tend to lean toward the heavier, larger end of the spectrum. Anyway, obviously you can see this is the blacked out version, and quickly let's take a look at some of the specifics on this knife. So you can see this blade in M390 with a DLC coating. I've tried to wipe my fingerprints off it, but it does have a little bit of fingerprint on it. It's got a nice back spine that's comfortable for your thumb. All right, a little bit of jimping right here that's not too effective, not doing a whole lot. The blade shape, I've got to say, I do really like. It's fairly thick, stocky blade, but it's nice and thin behind the edge, so the cutting performance on this is going to be quite nice, and that's one of the things that for me is a requirement. Even on a hard use knife, it's still a hard use knife, right? It's not a hard use pry bar or a hard use hatchet or something else. It's a knife, and so it needs to cut stuff, and this one absolutely does. And this blade becomes a really nice example of what a hard use blade should be. Being Wharncliffe and flat ground, it allows quite a bit of strength throughout so that you get a lot of confidence in using this knife. It's nice and thick, so yeah, this is a very tough, very durable blade. Of course, M390 steel is fantastic steel. Again, very tough, very usable, great edge retention, all the things we look for in a high-end knife, and in a heavy-duty, hard-use folder. Now, I want to introduce this idea now because M390 is a pretty premium steel. You're going to find it on fairly expensive knives, although I know there are some exceptions to that rule. Here's the thing though, the performance out of M390 is great, but there's this potential for someone who owns a knife like this to go, wait a second, I had to lay out such a large amount of cash that I'm really hesitant to use this, even if it is designed to be used and carried and even abused, to go above and beyond what most knives would be able to bear. And so you kind of are on the horns of a dilemma here. You've got this knife that's really designed to be, just a tank of a knife that just is comfortable in hand, and a blade that's just meant to really get out and chop on stuff and do some work. But boy, you'd be hesitant to do that based on the price. And, maybe some of you wouldn't. I mean, there's some people who I'm sure, the $800 that this costs is chump change, and they would use it, and if it broke, they'd just buy another one 5 minutes later. I dare say that's probably not most knife users, okay? And then I know there are others out there who say, nope, I buy all my knives to be used. Even though I'm not rich, I don't care if I spent 200 or 2,000, I'm going to carry it, I'm going to use it as I need to. So whatever camp you fall into, I totally understand that, but I do want to point out that there can be a bit of a dilemma there. And maybe some people would say, look, instead of this, I'd rather buy a Rat Model 1 and use it the same way, but if it can't take it and if it breaks, hey, I'm not out $800. I'll just go buy another, order another one on Amazon and it'll be there in 2 days, so no big deal. All right. I guess we should point out one other thing, and that is the blade is very, very much like the custom, right? If you go and pause this, go take a look at the custom, go over to Instagram, maybe you can even do that while you're watching this, and take a look at the custom. You can see that the footprint is the same, the handle, sort of cutout is the same, the blade is the same, but outside of that, the styling has some departures, as do, some of the fasteners and stuff like that. So you may want to do that and give you an idea. But the blade, while we're talking about the blade, it should be pointed out, this is pretty much directly from the custom, which is kind of nice. Now let's move over to lockup and deployment. So this is, of course, a frame lock. You can see the relief cut right there. If you look inside of there, you can actually see the little roller ball on the end of that detent, and some of you will know right away what that means. This does have a Hoback rolling detent, which is an interesting innovation and something that I don't dislike at all, although I will say that the action that it produces is different, okay? It's not as silky smooth as, say the latest thing from Riyadh or Shirogorov or even Wee knives. With just, with your single or even double row ceramic bearings, you're going to get a silkier smooth feel than what you're going to get on anything with a Hoback rolling detent, because you can feel that little roller ball rolling on the detent path the whole time. And so it definitely changes the feel. I'm not saying it's a bad thing at all. In fact, I think it's a really cool idea. Furthermore, if you take a look here, and we've talked about this before on the channel, but you can put, come on, focus. There we go. You can put what looks to be, hold on, I'm going to take this off camera for 1 second. Yeah, so you can put a little Allen key in there and screw that in or out to actually adjust how far that detent ball protrudes through the frame. And in that way, you can actually adjust how stiff or how soft the detent is. And that, I think, is a really, really neat feature. I don't know if it's something I want on every knife. I certainly don't feel like I'm missing it on knives that I have that don't have it. However, it is nice because it allows you to get a really nicely dialed in detent just to your own personal specifications, which is not something you normally see on any knife. Of course, any knife that doesn't have the Hoback rolling detent. Now, here is the biggest difference. This is just a standard, we've got a stainless steel insert with the Hoback rolling detent here. That is, that's fine, but it's a little more standard than the actual custom. On the custom, and again, I would encourage you to go over and check this out on Instagram, he actually combines the detent with the lock bar interface, sort of like what happens on a Chris Reeve, a 25, or an Insingo, or a couple of others, where that big ceramic ball not only serves as the detent ball, but also serves as the lock bar interface between the lock bar and the blade. So, Snecx kind of followed that pattern. He used a pin that actually went through the whole thing, which was a really, really cool idea. This knife lacks that. And so that's one of those features that you're not getting here that you would be getting on the custom. The other one that stands out that probably all of you can see is that Snecx designed his knife to come apart in the field with nothing more than a credit card or a slot screwdriver. This quite clearly has Torx bits. Now, if you're into knives like I am, you have a torque set, you probably have 16 of them, because every time you break your number 6, which is the most common one, you have to buy another whole set to get another number 6. And so, I have like 2 or 3 functional number 6 Torx bits and 6 or 8 full sets of Torx drivers. One of them is the Weehaw set, and I actually keep the Weehaw set in my bag, so I have it with me all the time. And so for me, that's not a big deal, although it is certainly a departure. Thinking of departures, let's kind of move on to, oh yeah, there's one other point I actually wanted to bring up while we're talking about the action. The flipper I find quite comfortable. The action is quite nice. The blade isn't super snappy, but again, you could adjust that detent. I'm not going to do it because this is not my knife. It flips out fine, and I have no problem with, reliability or anything, which is my primary measuring stick when it comes to action. However, let me just point you at the end of my finger there to that stop pin. Okay, that is not a huge stop pin. And that's not the end of the world. I'm sure the stop pin is big enough. And, Jake Hoback is an engineer. He can do the math on that himself. I'm sure that the stop pin here is sufficient. All right. However, on a hard use knife, I don't want sufficient. I want stupidly overbuilt. Okay, that's the detent, that's the stop pin in the Formax, okay? And if you look at the Snecx Custom, if you look at it in videos, you can see either on Instagram or in videos, you can see that big beefy stop pin back there, and I really wish they would have carried that over. Even my Inkosi has a big stop pin like that, and that's one of the things I also appreciated about it. Now, I will say this stop pin does appear to move freely. So it spins, which means you're gonna get sort of, the same kind of wear all around. You're not going to get that one point where the blade is always striking the stop pin, which is going to create wear, maybe undue wear. You're going to get very even wear over the whole stop pin, which is kind of a neat thing. But again, one of the things that I look for in a stop pin on a knife like this is that it's a bit bigger, it's a bit beefier than the stop pin on here is. All right, one last thing while we're talking about action, and this is the only real 2 complaints that I have. The relief cut here is very, very thin. So the lock bar tension is not high. It makes the knife very easy to use. One of the things that people have often commented on is that Ferrum Forge knives, which have the kind of lock bar cutout I appreciate, they tend to have a little stiffer lock bar tension, and part of that is because of the way they mill their relief cut. It's an actual, it's a milled out hole. It almost gives it the same kind of structure as a steel I-beam, where you're getting a little bit more strength there. And I would have liked to see something like that implemented on this. After all, this is supposed to be a heavy duty, hard use knife that'll, just take anything the world can throw at it. And part of my expectation again on that, in addition to a stop pin, is also the relief cut. Now, moving on to the handle, I've gotta say, really, really cool handle. I love this honeycomb pattern. This is one of the, one of the influences of Jake Hoback on this knife. And the honeycomb pattern, of course, as you guys all know from, elementary school, is a nice way of, hollowing something out while retaining a great deal of strength. So it does lighten up the knife significantly. I'm sure if you just didn't bother with any of this and you just had straight slab-sided titanium, you'd add another ½ ounce or something like that to the knife, which is already a heavy knife. I don't know that would matter all that much, right? Would I be complaining if this was 7.6 ounces instead of 6.6 ounces? No, it's a big, heavy knife, and you sort of expect that. But I do find it very attractive. The honeycomb pattern works really well as the blade cutout. Now, the one thing I kind of wish is I can envision how cool this would look if this was a satin blade or even a stonewash blade, where you'd see the satin or the stonewash through the honeycomb pattern. I think that would be a pretty cool look to achieve, and sort of have, just that extra little detail that would put this knife on one more level up in terms of just its overall aesthetic, which is already extremely cool. I mean, this is a really, really awesome looking knife. And so, I don't know. I just feel like, and that's totally subjective. Maybe you're like, no, 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 it needs to be all blacked out. And if that's your position, hey, you're more than welcome to disagree with me on that or just about anything else. All right. So that kind of covers the handle. The construction, I haven't really touched on the details of the construction. We've got this full back spacer here. And you can see this is something that is coming over from the custom. You can see that backspacer has been cut out to allow room for the blade to drop in there. And in fact, it's actually proud of the scales, again, because that blade, you know, kind of drops right in as deep as it can possibly go. And you can see right there how that's working. It's actually a groove allowing for the blade to drop into that handle as deeply as possible. Pocket clip is, of course, single position, which is pretty much expected on a knife in this, where, you know, of this caliber, right? We don't expect to see holes milled for a pocket clip on the other side over here when, you know, design is as important as it is in a knife like this, but it does work very well, and they have carried over that honeycomb pattern. Again, this might be something I could see people switching out and doing something a little bit different with, especially, you know, some kind of, you know, fancy mocha tie or whatever would create an interesting contrast with the black here. So let me go ahead and get to some comparisons, because this is one of those things where, you know, let's be honest, most people buying this are not going to be going out and using it to skin a hog or you know, taking it into the sandbox to carry out covert operations. But it does claim to be a heavy-duty hard-use knife, and that begs for some comparison to some other heavy-duty hard-use knives. Actually, let's do this one first, since this is more in a similar vein. This, of course, is the Curtis F3. There's a lot of things that the Curtis F3 does that this also does, and I think that's really cool. I think the Curtis has a well-balanced blade for being heavy-duty and confidence-inspiring, just like this does. The Curtis is actually a little bit smaller, which seems odd even saying that. And most knives that you're going to have are not going to be bigger than an F3, but that one, of course, is. We've got the Benchmade Crooked River over here, which again is a pretty large, heavy-duty knife, and I think this falls into a similar category. I've made some changes to this knife that certainly increase the cost, that make it a little more special, a little more interesting, but which perhaps make it a little less practical. And guess what? That's okay. I absolutely love this knife. I use it, carry it all the time. What else have we got? Yeah, so the Recon 1. I've got to bring the Recon 1 in here because, you know, when it comes to a hard use knife that you're actually going to use, I do not know of anything on the market that is going to compete well with the Recon 1. Okay, I think there are other things that'll do almost what the Recon 1 will do, but especially in the flat ground blade configuration, I don't know, you would be hard pressed to get me to pick a different knife. If you said, Kevin, you need something that can really take a beating, that really you feel like you can do anything that anything could happen, this is probably the knife I want. And there's not too many others that I would take over it. This one might kind of be the exception, but it is, you know, so much heavier that I would have to really think long and hard before making that choice. Okay, so this would be my last comparison. And again, this is a great example of, you know, how a hard use knife ought to be implemented. A crazy strong lock, huge overbuilt components, you know, really nice high-end blade steel. Those are the kinds of things that I like to see, especially on a more expensive hard use knife. So what's my overall conclusion on this knife? Well, look, guys, this is a piece of functional artwork, right? This is beautiful. It allows you to have an extremely unique and highly sought after design, something that is well put together, that you are rarely going to see someone like, you know, the chances that, I don't know, you go to a knife meetup or something and you have this in your pocket and someone else goes, hey, I got the same knife, is pretty stinking rare. Okay, and so there's a lot to draw a person to this knife. It is a really, really cool knife. Now, I know many of you as my viewers are like, Kevin, give me a Rat Model 1 and I'm fine. And I get that. But I will also say that I absolutely appreciate something like this for what it is. Okay, this is not meant to be the knife that you go to Walmart and pick up and then just kind of use it for your everyday average cutting tasks. This is meant to be something special, and it is something special. And that's how I think as a reviewer, I have to keep in the back of my mind that this is not really your regular run-of-the-mill folding knife that everybody's just going to throw in their pocket. This is something for collectors. It's something for someone who wants something special and unique, who, looks for those kinds of items in their life. And I absolutely get it. I really, really do. So thank you so much, Daniel, for letting me experience this knife, for giving me the chance to share it with all of the people who will watch this video, both my own subscribers and anyone else who will kind of stumble across this as they go along. I should add, I didn't really say too much about the ergonomics, but if you're buying a knife that, if you want something special and something heavy duty that you can still use, the ergonomics on this are really, really nice. It is comfortable in hand. The blade is really great, so it will cut stuff. And the design is really, really cool. One of perhaps the coolest custom knives of the last year, 2018. And this does allow you, despite the fact that all of the full customs are gone, to have something that is, of course, directly from that designer, done in collaboration with a manufacturing setup that's going to do a great job in terms of quality and finish and performance. So there you go, guys. That's my overall take on the Hoback Snecx Buster Colaboration. What a cool knife. I hope that those of you who have these really, really enjoy them. And I hope that those of you who are watching, even though I understand that there's very little chance of you being able to run out and buy one of these, let me just say, if you follow Daniel on Instagram, maybe he'll be at some point ready to part with this one. And so, Daniel, you may have everyone bugging you about this knife now. Thanks for lending it. Thanks you guys for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you soon.